Melissa, I just want to start by giving everybody a little bit of background. I know you've worked for many, many years with Francine Meisler, and the two of you worked together initially together on this project. So can you tell us about your working relationship with Francine?
My pleasure. I love Francine. She's just a truly wonderful person and so great at her job. It's hard to kind of not want to be around her. But on this specifically, she actually had started the pilot before the strikes happened. And then the strikes happened in the middle of their work on the pilot. And then by the time the strikes had ended, months later, she was no longer available. And so she reached out to me, the producers reached out to me, and I took over from there. So I finished the pilot and then did the rest of the series.
So that's interesting. I don't know whether we talk in terms of number of roles or percentage. How much was done? How many roles or what was left for you to come in and pick up for the pilot?
I wish I could really remember. No, she did a substantial amount of work, and then whatever wasn't done, I don't remember exactly, but then I came in to finish that. And then again, there was a lot to do in the series as well. So just picked it up.
So can you give us an idea of what the process was for booking a role in the studio? And could we start maybe actually with, the people that we know, the people that we recognize, or the people who were playing themselves in the show? What was the process for them?
That's a really good question. It was different. So there were people who, as we call them our celebrities or our very high level guest stars. Those people had not everyone that was cast, obviously, but when the scripts were written in, they were written in the actors. So, they had people in mind for certain parts or whatnot. And so when we came on board, we just took all of those names out of all of the scripts, because I don't know if anyone knows this, but they basically cross-boarded the entire series. So sometimes you'll do, 2 episodes or 3 episodes, but this was all 10 episodes were kind of shot simultaneously. So we just took all of the actors' names that were called out, by name, and just started tackling availability and interest and things like that, and started that process. And then once we would offer it to somebody, we would send them an exclusive offer, and then we would offer up a Zoom meeting with Seth and Evan, and they would pitch the project to them and the role and what they had in mind for the scene, and then send them a script afterward. And so that was the celebrities, and then they would want to do it or they wouldn't, and then we would start that process all over again. And some roles, it was the first choice, and some it was not, and a lot of that had to do with availability and things like that, because these people we were going after are all in really high demand. So again, it was just kind of rolling through that process, which was very, very complicated. but yeah, you just kind of do what you got to do. And then there was a lot of roles that we did audition for that showed up. They're the ones that I really think populated this world and gave it a lot of interesting flavor. And then those we auditioned, and we would start with self-tapes and then do Zoom auditions and with callbacks and things like that. And
so I want you to give us an example, because somebody yesterday was talking to us about the difference between 2D and 3D. So self-tape is the first step. How many people or can you give us an idea of what the ratio might be for Ike's assistant? How many people submitted self-tapes, or how many people did you invite to submit self-tapes?
That's hard to answer, because it varies role to role and how complicated that role might be, I try personally to not go overboard. I don't like wasting people's time. I don't like my time being wasted. I don't like your time being wasted. So it really is very intentional. How many, and then if for whatever reason we're not finding it in that group, or if we send our selects and something's off or they change their mind, then we'll do another round. But it's hard to say how many, because we certainly don't like to just it's not like a cattle call for every role, but it's intentional.
So then you'll decide to bring a few people that you thought were the best fit for the role to invite to a Zoom audition.
Sometimes, again, it depends on the role. I'm sorry, that's a really not interesting answer, but it does depend on the role. Because sometimes if it's a one-line role, and usually when we audition one-line roles via self-tape, we say please do it a few different times so we can kind of see what you might bring to set, and we don't need to do callbacks. You all have resumes and are very talented, and so not always necessary. But if it's a guest star or recurring role, usually we'll bring some back in, and I'll either work with them or try to get them a little closer to what I know the creatives are looking for in that role, so that they're either set up for success when we send them, or if they've come back to me with notes, and then I'll work with them, or kind of along those lines.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get the really full picture. So that first Zoom audition for people who participate would maybe be just with you.
Potentially.
Yeah. And what framing are you generally like? If it's a physical role, are you looking for different framing other than the sort of?
Oh, that's such a good question. Zoom auditions are hard, and I understand that. I try to approach it with just understanding and kindness. I mean, it's I am never I'm never gonna be like, this isn't working, because that's not your fault. That's my fault, right? Like, we're supposed to set you guys up to look your best in that kind of place. So if there's if action is needed in the role, and that is something I need to test, we will be very specific about blocking and whatnot. But the truth is a lot of times action isn't needed in the role so much. And so I wouldn't pick that scene to put, like, let's make it easy on each other, like that's hard to block and hard to find the rhythm of the scene within sometimes, especially in an audition in general, whether it's in Zoom or in person.
And then for the most part, after a Zoom, you're sending that recording to anybody who needs to see it, and then an offer is made.
Yeah. Well, you have to go through the approval process with the studio and network, so that's an added plus. But yeah, essentially, yeah, like the creatives will have their select or two, and then we send that to the studio, and they weigh in, they send it to the network, and they say approved or not.
So with this process in particular, did you have any roles in particular that you really wanted to defend to the creatives, or were you of a similar mind most of the time?
Yeah, I think those guys are so intelligent. They're so smart, and I don't think they get enough credit for that, but they're really smart, and they really know what they're looking for. So once that's articulated to me, I have a good idea of what I'm looking for. And so yeah, I mean, it's pretty on par. I will say they have really good taste. So
That's great. And I imagine, Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen wrote, produced, directed this show. I mean, it's them. So I'm imagining that there wasn't too much pressure between them and the studio over roles of people who auditioned.
I think that the studio network were really supportive of them. I'm sure there were a couple back and forths, but for the most part, they're really supportive. And yeah, it is them, the show. And so, yeah.
All right. I want to ask you more generally, rather than this show in particular, when you're starting on a show, or maybe even before you've agreed to take a film or a show, and you read the script, what is your process for starting on a project?
It depends what the project is, and it depends what the needs of the project are. So if it's a studio film or an indie film or a TV show, it depends what the immediate needs are and how much time you have. So you're always going to kind of start with the lead, or if someone comes attached, then the second lead or the third, or if a role is very difficult and you're going to need to spend more time on that role. Like when I was doing Winning Time and we had to find a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I mean, I knew that was coming for a long time, so I started that really early. But yeah, you make a list of all the roles, and you kind of weigh them out by size, and then you need to find out when they start. So, sometimes on a series, some will start sooner than later. So you just try to weigh the importance in time as well. And you just kind of get started. Usually it's from the bigger roles down to the smaller, but yeah.
Was there anything on this that was particularly challenging?
On the studio? the studio. No, but it was good. It was a good time. It was just a lot. So it's just a lot of roles, a lot to keep track of, a lot to, continually manage the timing of and when they're going to be shooting and how much time we have. And if they want to go for someone really huge, you usually need a little more of a lead time with that. And there was a lot of roles in it, so not only the celebrity roles, but there's a lot of wonderful day players in there. And we did some extras on this one who were going to be very featured. So it was just managing all of that, I think, was probably the most difficult. And then the celebrity deals were very difficult as well, because we also do a lot of negotiating and deal making, and that's a big, big part of it. And so just keeping tabs on everything and working through it all in the time you need to do it.
It's interesting that you bring up deal making, because I'm assuming that if I'm walking into a show like that on a very well established streamer or network, that there's no negotiating to be done. If it's a co-star role or a day player, like, there is no negotiation. Is that right?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's very clear what they have in the budget. I try very hard to make that clear up front to people, because I certainly, like, if you're not going to do it for scale, I don't want you to waste your time. And then later you find out it's for scale, and then, I really like to be efficient, and I'm really respectful of people's time, because I think we've all got things to do. But so we just try to be open when that's the case. And sometimes it's not the case. It just depends on your production and what they have budgeted.
I want to ask you about this episode. We can't not talk about the episode because it's so hilarious, about casting. So hilarious they made a whole episode about it. What resonated to you personally, if anything, about that episode?
I felt very seen. I think that's one reason I love this show so much, is you really feel validated living and working in this industry. It's very stressful to watch, but it's very validating, because you either have experienced it or someone who's experienced it. And so a lot of the hardships in this industry, I think, fly under the radar in terms of what the masses see or know about how hard we all work. And I think this show did a really good job about exposing a lot of that in a really funny way. So, but yeah.
Is there one role or a couple of roles or anything in particular, and there may not be, that stands out to you as a particularly gratifying choice or something that you're really proud of?
Yeah, a lot of them, actually. I love a lot of our actors, most of them. But I really liked the Rebecca Hall in the pediatric oncologist episode, because I just find her to be so elegant. And I think that in that competition that they were having between the doctors and the studio, I just thought that elegance of hers really lent to the difference between what is the respect a doctor gets versus the respect or not respect that a studio executive gets. So I thought she just did such a beautiful job.
Very funny episode. So I'd like to talk to you about, when we're auditioning for these kinds of roles, is there anything you think that actors can do particularly to set themselves up for success?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things you can do. Being an actor, I don't need to tell anyone here, is very, very hard. And I'd imagine it's very hard to not knowing what people are looking for or how to approach a scene or a character. And I think all you can really do is just do your best to break that scene down and how it makes sense to you. And also do the research that you have time to do on the filmmakers or the creators or the studio and network, and try your hardest to match tonally what you think they might be looking for. So if you're auditioning for a network procedural versus a Apple show versus a HBO show, there is a tone usually there that you would do well to follow. And then just honestly do your best performance. That's how you're going to get remembered and noticed. I don't think this is a unique casting director thought, but I really do remember people from other auditions I've seen them in, and say to my office, like, Rochelle remember she did that great audition a couple of weeks ago or for the other year ago, and let's make sure she comes in for this. And so it's really just about putting your best foot forward and just going into it with confidence and a relaxation, because yeah, it's just what's going to keep you remembered and keep you working, because only one person gets the role, but we see and remember a lot of other people.
Awesome. Also, comedy is difficult. And, when you break down a script and when you choose pieces, maybe for sides, and you're looking for particular moments, or there are beats in the script that you need them to hit. Do you have any tips or tricks, if they exist, for actors when they're breaking down their audition pieces?
Scenes tend to be rhythmic and melodic in the way that they're written. And I find when you are looking at a substantial amount of people for a role, they all start to flow and fall into this rhythm. And after you've seen a lot of auditions in this same rhythm, it starts to feel very repetitive, as you can imagine. And it's not that anyone's not doing a good job. It's just you're getting stuck into the melody of it. And I would just say, find where you can break out of that, find where you can break out of that and make it your own, or make moments where it's not obvious. That's the stuff that really gets your attention, and surprises you and makes you giggle out of nowhere. And you've seen 30 auditions in a row and you're tired, and so I think it's really just trying to find those moments where maybe it's not as expected and you can kind of put your stamp on it while still existing within that scene.
And then also, you talked about some of the one-liners. I think when you hear who the filmmakers are, it would give you a sense of tone. And when you're coming in with a one-line, you don't want to make a huge deal out of it, right? So with one-liners, is there anything different about those?
There is something different about those, and I think you're exactly right. I think you shouldn't make more out of it than it is, but that goes with any size of role, right? I mean, or I guess it just depends on what your show is, right? Like if it is supposed to be big and grand, and then stick with the big and grand. But most one-liners are supposed to be in service of some other part of the scene, right? And so I think there are so many people that can stand out doing those while still being very grounded and keeping it in a real place, versus making it something that wouldn't appear what that character's normally doing or being called upon, right? It's just not necessary. So I feel like the ones that really can just kind of settle into it are the ones that actually stand out more.
And do you take any notice, just like for actors who don't have many credits but are trying to get more experience, are you really just looking at their auditions, or is there anything that they can do to help?
I'm big on having a really strong package for yourself. It is so rare that, and I can tell no one in this room this is not the situation, because there's no one in here who has done nothing in terms of acting, whether you've been cast in something or not. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, you've been in plays, or you've had classes, or worked with friends, or were in a like, everyone's got something to work with, so I think it's a matter of how you put that together to present that to agents or casting or producers or whatever it is, but just making it concise and so that you look your strongest, right? I mean, this industry is all about perception, and I think manipulating that in an honest way is going to be the best for you.
So knowing your casting and making sure that your headshot represents the way.
Yeah, like your headshot should be you. I mean, there's like an old adage of like, it should be you on your best day, but it should be, but more than you, it should be how you are and how you behave and how you act. So, a very obvious example is like, if I don't know, if someone's like really sexy, and they come in for, but their picture looks like they're the, girl next door, and they're auditioning for that, and they come in as, just not quite matching the girl next door persona, like that's not going to get you a job, right? You want to embrace what you bring to the table as a performer and as an essence and as a look that will get you the job that you're being called in for. So that starts with a headshot and just being honest with yourself and how that is and what you're selling.
And then does it make a difference? Someone asked me this week whether or not it made a difference whether or not they had a demo reel attached to their submission.
Not to me. I think if you're going to put a demo reel together, it should be strong. And I don't mean that it needs to be strong with good or like noticeable shows that you've been on, but even if it's just a self-tape, it should just be of good quality. It should show you doing some really nice work. But I think people get stuck into I got to show something and it's really old or it's not of good production value, so it looks cheaply made, and what does that show? So I think it just, whatever it is, should be like, think less is more, right? Like it's stronger if it's smaller, and just, again, back to the perception thing, like you want to put your best foot forward. If I see someone that's just got loads of things and it's kind of messy and all over the place, I can't tell who you are, and so it's difficult to make a decision if you're right for this or wrong for this. But if you've got a really clear, even if it's just a very good self-tape, I'm like, oh, okay, like this is what they can do. And here's this, I get an idea of how you work and your body works and moves and how you talk. And to me, I find that much more helpful than, trying to string together some things just to have something.
So, of course, that translates to self-tapes too, like not to worry too much about the best lighting and the best, just like you hit these beats, I believe you.
Yeah, look, self-tapes are their own animal, but I do think there's a way to conquer them. And I think that as long as I can see you and I can hear you, and you're close enough so I can see the movement of your face, to me, that's great, and I don't care if there's a refrigerator behind you, who cares, but I think that those are some key factors, right? See, hear, I guess it's really only 2 factors.
What about slates? I feel like slates are a really weird. Do you have any advice?
I'm sorry. I know they're so bad. No, you know what? I feel like short and sweet is the true answer. Let's just get a long shot in there and just tell me your height at the very minimum. But it's important, especially in the self-tape world. It's important that we have them and get an idea of you. It doesn't need to be like a pan down. Just a quick flash is great.
All right, great.
Don't need to overthink them.
I think I just have one more question for you before we get into the scene work. And I guess it's, well, actually I have 2. How is it possible for people without representation to be seen by your office, or how might it be possible?
Absolutely. I love learning about new people. I don't know. I just think the world is brimming with like creative and interesting talent that has yet to have their moment. But certain roles call for it. So certain roles, if it's a big search or it's a unique role, that's a lot of times when we see people who aren't represented. But I don't know, just reach out, email, make yourself available on Actors Access, or I don't know, maybe not Actors Access, I don't know, but just one of the sites where like we can find you. I've got to be able to find you. If you're just out there and I don't know you exist, we gotta like figure out the pulling that together. But people email my office all the time with just like, hi, howdy, this is my postcard. It's like the modern postcard. But yeah, it just depends on what we're looking for. All right. Yeah.
Melissa, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Of course,
We're really looking forward to jumping in.